we are going to talk today about reporting story in NAV 7. So that will be, of course, some sneak preview because we are going to do more. NAV 7 is still under development, but I hope you will enjoy it. Let's talk about goals for our today's presentation. First of all, and most important, of course, I'd like to give you an impression of what NAV 7 reporting story is about. What we have improved in compared to 2009, what's completely new. Another big goal for me is to get your feedback. As I said, we are still under development, and there are still features which are not in, and we are deciding should we do it or not. So during the presentation, I'm going to highlight things which are not done yet, and I will ask your opinion. So I hope it will be a relatively interactive session. So I'm going to do several small demos. I don't have one big demo, but I will be switching from presentation to C-side all the time. And yeah, we are not going to talk about NAV 2009 transformation for classic reports. I know it's an important point, it's important topic for many of you. But we have done quite many sessions on this topic when we released NAV 2009. And I guess we will do more when we will release NAV 7. But currently this area is not ready for discussion yet. So just to start being interactive, I have some questions to you. How many developers are in the room? Please raise your hands. Wow. How many of you have attended any NAV 2009 reporting session, training? Still impressive. How many of you have implemented some NAV 2009 reports yourself? Wow, more than I expected, actually. That's great. So, of course, understanding of our NAV 2009 reporting architecture would be beneficial for understanding this session, but I will try to cover all gaps, even for people who haven't heard about NAV 2009 reporting. So you will get a consistent impression about what we are going to do in NAV 7. And I hope everybody can understand my perfect Russian accent of English language. Great. So, agenda. We are going to follow this agenda for today. First of all, we will discuss what we have done in NAV for reports. After that, we will touch very important and sensitive topic, upgrade. Next, we will talk about external components which we brought to NAV 7. And after that, we will take a look on what we are going to do with our reports. So, before we go into NAV 7 report designer, let's take a look on what we have in NAV 2009. How do we design reports in NAV 2009? First of all, it's important to remember that in NAV 2009, one report object needs to be runnable from both classic client and role-tailor client. So, when we start designing report, we design our data structure, put all data items, add all business code which we need to different report triggers on after get record, on pre-data item, etc. After that, we design classic layout sections. But we also want to be able to run this report in RTC. If we want to run this report in RTC, this report should be RDLC report. It's a reporting services report. And reporting services report, RDLC, it has a requirement. We need to define data set up front. So at that moment of time, we had a very good idea that all fields which you use on sections, you actually will use also in your RDLC layout. So we kind of reflected over section and created That's just extract from a normal dataset definition for a report in NAV 2009. As you can see, based on names, it's not very intuitively understandable. So names are weird because we generate them. You don't have any control over names. You have too many fields which you really don't need, and so on. So in NAV 2009, as I said, we had hybrid reports. And we call them hybrid because one report object has kind of two phases. One is a classic phase, and one is a RDLC phase. So it's a hybrid. In NAV7, as I guess everybody knows, we are not going to support classic reports. So anybody surprised? No, that's good. So that gives us a unique possibility to do redesign of our dataset designer. So we introduced an element which we call report dataset designer, and we use it in order to create dataset definition. Let's go to C side. Let's say new report. So now I'm in a dataset designer. It looks almost the same, but it's not. In the left column, you have a data item. And when I move next line, you have a column. So I will define all my fields here. So I go to field menu, and I select some elements from here, like a code, name, address, phone number, something like that, and say OK. Yes, I want. So it inserted 4 columns. It generated names. On the right side, you can see column names, which you will use in Visual Studio when you will design your layout. I can also use a symbol menu. You can go here. Oops. It's just moving out of the screen. And go and, for example, let's say, go to the database, function, company name. But here you can see I haven't generated a default name because generally I could not generate a source name or generate default name for any source expression. So I will have to type it in myself. Now I want to add another data item. Postcode. Window. Object designer. It disappeared from screen. No. Just a second. Cannot be closed. It's logged by table list. Alt and space bar. Doesn't work. Yeah, okay. That's a demo effect. Haha. I will go. No. Okay, I am back. So, and my report is not safe, so I will need to start from scratch. I am sorry for this inconvenience. So now I will insert my fields again. Yes, I will insert database company name, And now I want to add another data item. So I want to add postcode, and it has a default name. And I'm doing same things as before. So I go to the data item link and define my data item link. It's code, and here it's a postcode. Okay. So it looks pretty similar. I go again to symbols menu and add one field from here. So you can also go to your code in the same way as before by pressing F9. You are coming to the code editor. So from this point of view, nothing has changed. So I save. And compile. Great. Now I want to go to Visual Studio. I say View Layout, and it opens me Visual Studio in a second with an empty layout. If I go to View, Report Data, it's Ctrl-Alt-D, then I will see my data source. And you can see my data source now looks much more reasonable than what we had before. So let's just make a simple report. Let's drag a table here and go back to report. Nothing is really new here. Name, city, code. Okay. Now I go back to Visual Studio, I load report, and now because I don't have classic client, I can perfectly run from here. So I will either say File, Run, or I will just press Ctrl-R. That will bring Role Tailor client. And nothing happened. Why? Because we forgot to compile. So when I uploaded report back, I need to compile. Run again. Now I have my report on the screen. Let's go back to the presentation. So in R2, we introduced a more advanced integration with Visual Studio. Many of you complained that it's a really long round trip between designer in C-side and Visual Studio. You need to close Visual Studio. If you want to add a new field, you add a new field. After that, you compile report. After that, you open Visual Studio again, which takes time. So this problem is fixed. Let me show you. So let's add one more column here. Let's say we will add a code from postcode. We have a name collision, so I resolve it myself, because we don't resolve name collisions. Now I save, compile, and go to Visual Studio. In Visual Studio, I have a dialog which tells me that data definition is updated, so I say yes. And unfortunately, I need to make one more step. I go to data source, and I say refresh. And wow, I have a postcode in my dataset definition, which I can use immediately. And if I save report here, go back to C-side, load it here, compile, and run, when I have a preview which contains a postcode. So you can see that round trip became much faster. But that's not it. We have even more. Let's say I want to rename one of the fields from company name to my company name. And I save it again. And I'm going also to delete this field because I don't need it. So I compile. Doesn't work. Doesn't work because I need to have a code field. Oops, no, postcode. Okay. But I changed my company name, company name to my company name. So I compile it, go back to Visual Studio, again refresh, and I have a new name for my field. As you have just seen, I can rename only, delete only elements which are not used in the layout. If the element is used in the layout, then I couldn't do it because I need to compile report before. So now we are coming to the next question. And yes, I can always add a new field to the layout. So here is the question. With a green color, I highlighted features which we haven't done yet, but we might do in the rest of NAV7. The first feature is rename refactoring. So if you rename field in your dataset designer, then it will get renamed all the way to Visual Studio. How many people believe that makes sense? Okay, thanks. Second element, we will probably not be able to do. Because if you delete an element from the dataset designer, we don't really know what to do, and this element is referenced from layout, then we don't know what to do with layout. If we just delete an expression, you might have a broken layout, and that's probably worse than have an error and go and consciously fix this error. Another element from the same area is a tool to detect unused fields. So if field is not used in my layout, I'd like to be able to go to the menu and say delete unused fields, and that will shrink my dataset size. How many believe that makes sense? Okay, thanks. I'm actually curious when the rest who hasn't raised their hands will see upgrade, and the dataset which you get after upgrade will believe this feature makes sense. Captions and labels. When we considered this new designer, the idea was that in the dataset designer, we want to have only data. And captions, they are not data, they are metadata. So we don't want to model them in the same place. But if you think about captions, then you will see there are two dimensions when we start talking about captions. First dimension is where this caption comes from. Is it a caption of a table field, or is it a report-specific caption? If it is a caption of table field, you want just to include it. And if it is a report-specific caption, then you want to be able to model it inside report. That's the first dimension. And in order to address this first dimension, we introduced the include caption property and label dialog. So if I just stay on any column and go to properties, then at the end I have a property which is called include caption. If I say yes, then it means that the caption for this property will be included to the data set. But there is also a dialog which is called labels. If I go to view labels, then here I have a label dialog, and I want to say my label. And that's a normal multi-language label, so I can go to property, and you can see that it's all standard caption properties. So if I save it, compile it, and go to Visual Studio, refresh again, then I will get all these labels. And if I will have, for example, instead of code 2 times, I will delete it, insert address. You can see that some elements of Visual Studio Design surface also improved significantly. Now I go caption and drag it to this field. Oops, I need to go here. And say equal to first fields, exclamation mark, address caption. Data set, score result. Normally it should be draggable, but my hand's shaking, so I had to type it in. So I have now these labels. I can build report here, go back to C-side, load it. Oh, again. Again, I forgot to recompile. That's actually a pain. It would be great if it would compile. Yes, I think so. Yep. So we have, yes, I have an error in caption, so that's probably I have an error in expression. Nope, doesn't work like that. Okay. Compile and run. Is it better now? Yes, it's better now. So that's the first dimension. But the second dimension, which we haven't implemented yet, is a multiplicity. Sorry? No, that's not right. It's address because I actually added 2 captions. I added one caption from the address field, and that's an address. And the second was local report caption, which I called label 1, and I haven't used it yet. I will use it later. So that's the right output. So the second dimension, which we kind of want to introduce, and we haven't introduced yet, is a multiplicity. The question is, for some labels, for some captions, I don't want really to have them in a data set, because it's the same label for the whole report. I have only one value. And having it placed in the data set really is just waste of memory. So we introduced property which is called per row. Maybe it's not the best name and we will reconsider. But now that works always per row. So I couldn't place today label not in the data set. But the idea, I can show you how it should look like. So imagine I go here, view labels. And here currently it's per row. No, if I want it to work today, it will be yes, but imagine it's still no. So when I will come to Visual Studio, I will have on the parameters node, I will have an additional collection, which will list all single value parameters. And I will be able to drag this parameter, if I have parameter. Imagine I do. When I will be able to drag a parameter to the report in this way. So this optimization is supposed to shrink data set size big time. Again, how many believe that makes sense? Thanks. So I will remove this parameter because I don't have it. So go back. Oh, yes. Okay. So now, what's next? Now it's a, as I said, pretty sensitive topic. What we are going to do with upgrade? First of all, we are going to have only dataset reports in NAV 7. All other reports will be upgraded one or another way. NAV 2009 reports, RDLC reports, will be 99.9% upgrade. And I really like to say here 100%. But there is one edge case which we discovered, which doesn't let me say 100%. And I will go back to this edge case just in a minute. For classic reports will follow existing create layout suggestion approach. So you have a classic report, you will create layout suggestion, which is, for some reports are good, for some reports can be better. I can hear some people laughing. So, and all reports should be compiled before upgrade. Let's take a look how this upgrade will work. So I exit from here. Oh, that's another usability feature. You couldn't exit Designer until you close Visual Studio. We had many requests that people complained that they were exiting Designer without saving their work in Visual Studio. And that was one of the pain points because people were losing their work in Visual Studio. So now if you have Designer open, you need to close Visual Studio before. And now we can go to the upgrade. So I have a couple 2009 reports prepared. One with RDLC, and which is hybrid report, and one without, which is pure classic. I will show how it works on a hybrid report, because pure classic report currently doesn't work. I'm running a very fresh build. It's like 2-3 days old. So things are changing all the time. And I think actually, if I would sync up today, then I would be able to actually upgrade both reports, classic and RDLC. But I didn't risk to change my installation just before demo. So I say with RDLC, I go up 111. And here, what if I try to press design? Says report is not a dataset design, so couldn't be opened. Run, also couldn't be opened. Now I compile it. And if you will take a look on the modified flag, when if everything will be successful, then modified flag will get changed. So yes, now my report is upgraded. So that's how report 111 looks after upgrade. Of course, we had to use same old naming because you are referencing these names in your layout, and we are referencing these names. But if we implement rename refactoring, then it will be pretty easy to change names here and get rid of such nice names as this one. Okay, if just to prove that it is runnable, I compile it. Let me check that I don't have any previews open. I don't. And I run it. So, yep, it's running. And I have this report runnable in NAV 7. So, you can see that it costed me no work to upgrade this report, RDLC report, to NAV 7. I know many people had a concern, and this concern was many times expressed, that if they invest to NAV 2009 reports, would this investment be wasted when we move to NAV 7? And no, it will not be wasted. So you will preserve your investment. Of course, in NAV 7, things should be smoother than in NAV 2009 in terms of reporting story. But your investment will be preserved. Okay. So let me come back to slides. As I promised, I will talk about this 0.1% case. So it's an edge case. So in the NAV 2009, we use RDLC format 2005. And it has a certain limitation. You could not use your dataset fields in the header. And in order to kind of work around this limitation, people came up with several approaches. And one of the approaches, which we discovered in our own reports, was to place a text box at the top left corner of your header. And this text box will just call a function setData. And data are coming through hidden fields to the body. All of you who have implemented NAV 2009 reports, you know this trick. And this function has no return value. The problem that in our reports, this text box was hidden. And report viewer 2010, a lot of numbers, report viewer 2010 introduced a new rendering sequence because you never know in which sequence controls will be rendered on the page. And because of this new rendering sequence, this top left text box was not rendered first. And text boxes which were expecting data from this text box, they were empty. We were lucky because this problem was easily fixable. We just made this text box visible. It doesn't contain any data. But I believe it's important to say that, yeah, we really tried to make it 100%, but it's pretty close. Next thing. There is a small side effect on labels, and I also want to show that. If we go here to labels dialog, then we will see many labels. And if I open property for each particular label, then you will see two properties. One is called parent data item, and another is called parent column. Our idealistic approach about labels was great, and reports should be designed in this way. And if you design a report from scratch, then you should follow the approach which I just described. Include caption or just add a label to the dataset, or add a label to labels dialog in the report. But the problem that in the existing reports, not everything was that smooth. And there are certain scenarios where people expect label to be printed only to a certain data item, and they are making some rendering decision based on that. And of course, our labels, which are in a label dialog, they will be printed to all data items. So we had to introduce these two properties in order to support upgrade, but we really do not expect people to use these properties if a report is created from scratch. Okay, go back. Little bit in details about upgrade, just to make it completely crispy. So if you have a classic report, 5.0 or NAV 2009 report without RDLC layout, when you could not run it, you could not design it, but you can import and export it. When we upgrade report, we delete request form, and request page there is no auto generation for request page. You need to use form transformation tool from NAV 2009 in order to create request page. But here there is no difference with what you have in NAV 2009. In 2009, you also need externally transform your request page to request form. We delete sections. We create new dataset design based on sections. And we create new RDLC layout with help of create layout suggestion from sections. If it is a hybrid report, when you could not run it, you could not design it, again you can import and export it. We delete request form, but request page which you have already is preserved. We delete sections. We create new dataset design, as you just saw, from sections. And your RDLC layout is preserved. We just internally transform it to the new format, which is RDLC 2008. Possible improvements. It's again topic for discussion. First possible improvement, which we most likely implement, is to do upgrade using RDLC 2008 capabilities. Because today, our create layout suggestion creates a RDLC 2005 report definition. And internally, under the hood, we transform it to RDLC 2008. But we still have to use all these workarounds, which we had in 2009, like these hidden fields in order to bring information to headers and things like that. So the first idea is to change create layout suggestion, and by that we will not have any hidden fields after upgrade, which I believe is good. The second idea, which I believe many of you would like, is to improve transformation. The question is, how many people would like to have 100% transformation? Not that many. From these who would like to have 100% transformation, how many of you would make changes in the classic over and over again and will just transform these changes from classic to RDLC time over time over time? Nobody. Great. I think that's the right approach, because with new RDLC you have richer capabilities than in a classic, so you can create much more attractive reports. Now let's talk about external components. Let's just check the time. 16:42. Report Viewer 2010. So there is nothing really fancy about Report Viewer 2010. We have to use it if we want to use RDLC 2008. There is one big end-user improvement, which I believe most of you will appreciate. You can save report to Microsoft Word. More than that, today you have, on server, you have save as PDF and save as Excel. We have added save as Word. So now all reports can be rendered to Word. How many people would use save as Word? Okay. We are using the same report viewer for SharePoint client, so no changes are needed for your report in order for this report to be runnable in SharePoint client. There is one limitation in SharePoint client, which is important. SharePoint client doesn't support direct print, so every time you run report, you will have a preview, which might introduce complexity on certain operations, but generally we consider that as an acceptable limitation for this version. Visual Studio 2010. Again, we just have to use Visual Studio 2010 because Visual Studio 2010 is the only designer for RDLC 2008. The question, how many improvements Visual Studio 2010 brings to us? I mean, I wouldn't call any major improvements. There are a lot of many usability improvements here and there, and I will try to point to them, like small improvements. For example, is if I go to Visual Studio, go to my report, which is a design, view, layout. You can see that, for example, names of fields are displayed in more readable way. People who used previous Visual Studio as designer, you all remember this fields, exclamation mark, blah, 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 and it's actually difficult to read what do you really have in this particular place. If you just drag, for example, text box, and you will start dragging that around, when you will see it shows you some lines of alignment, so you will get some automatical alignment. There are a lot of menus which are redesigned. For grouping, you have a visible row and column groups. If you have a tablix element, I will talk about that a little bit later. But besides that, nothing really major. The most important improvement is ability to use RDLC 2008 format. RDLC 2008 format is much richer and give you really many capabilities in comparison with RDLC 2005. First thing, which reduces major pain point, is the fact that you can reference fields directly from headers and footers. You don't need any hidden fields, no code, nothing. So that's really, really strong improvement, even if it's small. Functionality of text box also has been improved. You can put your HTML content to the text box, or you can put different colors inside one element of the text and things like that. Reporting services team also addressed many complaints which are related to the table, list, or metrics controls from RDLC 2005. They introduced a new control which is called tablix. You can still have a table and metrics on your toolbox, but they're just the templates for tablix. And I will go into more details when I will come to this tablix section. There are also new there is also a new control, which is called gauge, which helps you to visualize certain KPIs. And charting capabilities has been dramatically improved in compared with 2005. To not sound like a marketing person, I will go into more details when I will come to that. So let's take a look on fields in the header. So I have layout, I have my fields, and I say report, add page header. So now I have a header. I need to open my data source. And you have shortcuts for all these things. I just use a menu in order to be visible about what I'm doing. So, and I want to bring this label here. So, save it. You can see it's called expert. What's that? Let's take a look. It's called expert because it contains a complex expression which could not be visualized on a design surface. So it's a first, after that I have a value, and I'm saying for what region I'm doing this aggregation. So now I save it, go back, load, compile, and run. So now I have in Busa conference. Somebody asked me where is this label. So I have it on the screen. So I think it's a very big relief. Let's go next. Oops, I want to go back to presentation. Tablix. So Tablix control supposed to be simple, at least simpler than controls which we had before. If I go to Visual Studio here, I really don't need this expression. And I, for example, want to add a group. When I just go, say add group, parent group, say group by, I want to group by city, and that will add me a group. Also, when I navigate, even if I'm somewhere and I select group, always group is selected. And let's do the same operation with list. Okay. I go to Toolbox, I select a list, and to the list I will place, let's say, name, and also I will place city or search city. Here I will say again that I need to add a group, parent group, based on search city. And you can see in the design that groups are automatically populated in the list. So let's save it. Okay, also let's do some little formatting here. Placeholder property, font, underline. Okay, now save. Go back, yes, here. Load, compile, and run. Preview. So that's my group 1. And how does my list look like? You can see that's my list. So By the way, how many people believe that development round trip became smaller in an NAV7? Sometime. Okay. Okay. Now, the next element, and I'm not going to go really deep on each of RDL improvements, because I just don't have enough time to go really deep. But there are plenty of sample reports on the internet. My idea is just to scratch the surface and show what are new capabilities. Enhancement for text and HTML. So, as I said, we can mix fonts, colors, styles. We have a new thing which is called placeholder, and we can bind text to this placeholder, or we can bind HTML to this placeholder. Let's go back to Visual Studio. I want a different expression. I want a text box. And in the text box, I will say blah, 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 blah. And now I want to add a placeholder. Let's say create a placeholder. And now I can bind a value to this placeholder. I will bind, for example, this label. I can say that it's a plain text or it's HTML, but I know it's a plain text. And I can do some formatting, like, for example, text properties, font, red, and also same here, let's say. Font, red. So let's go back to C-side, load, compile, and run. So you can see that I can combine several styles, fonts, colors, placeholders in the same text box. I think it gives quite a lot of options for creating elements like a mail merge and things like that, which will make your reports simpler and will also make them more powerful. So now, small check, is everybody awake? So I will test it right now. I want to add another text box and say A, B, C, D, E, F. And I will format it differently. Font. So, good. Save. Go back. Compile. Run. Preview. Anybody can find anything strange on the screen? Yes? Right, so most people are still awake. That's actually, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, come on, that couldn't be bug in reporting services. That should be our bug. And yes, it's our bug. As I said, we are still in development, and I'm running a really live build. So it's found, and we will fix it, because we are doing sorting inside RDL in order for you to make merges easier. And in one place, we are sorting elements which we shouldn't sort. So it was a really funny bug when I just found it. Gauge. So gauge is a special UI element which was introduced, I think, by SQL Server 2008 to the reporting services. And you can have a pointer which points to one value. Let's try it out. So let's remove this list. I don't really need it. Let's add a gauge. I have plenty of types to select from. So some radial, some linear. I also have a thermometer somewhere if I want to show temperature. I don't know how many of you need to show temperature on report. I guess so. Yeah. So, and now I go back to report data and I select, let's say, city. And I don't really want to have a sum of the cities because it doesn't make sense. I will go and change it to count. And really not count, I probably want a count distinct, something like that. Distinct. There are also new aggregation functions which are added to this release of RDLC. So save. Let's see what we will get. Back. Load. Compile. Run. Preview. So what do I have? I have 6. Of course, it doesn't look that attractive here. But if you are developing something like a dashboard and you want to have several indicators on your dashboard, then you can have a panel of gauges. And if you have a panel of gauges which shows some of the most important KPIs for this report, then it will be really useful and really attractive. So, go next. Charts improvements. Charts are probably the area which was most significantly improved in RDLC 2008. The reason for that at the SQL Server 2008 release, Microsoft bought Dundas Control. And they were released with SQL Server 2008 server mode. And now it came also to RDLC. So we have around 10 new chart types, like a smooth line, candlestick. Huge improvements are in the axis area. So you can have several axes for several data series. You can have different scales. You can also have a scale break. You can use custom intervals. Our PM believes that one of the most important features is the custom colors. I probably disagree with that, but I think it's really cool to have custom colors. If you compare that with colors which we had in 2005, and that was a really boring colors, something from end of 90s. We also have a 3D effect, and designer UI is also new. Let's create some simple chart. Let's delete gauge, go to toolbox, bring a chart here. You see I have really many charts, and I want to use a 3D because that's a most cool chart. Everybody gets excited when they see 3D. So 3D, great. Now I want again report data. I go to city. Oops, not that. Control Z. City. And again, I don't want a sum. I want count. And I also use city as my series. So now I'm done. I save it. Go back. Compile and run is probably the most frequent phrase I was pronouncing during this presentation. So you can see I have a 3D chart. I have two big slices, one related to the unknown location, and one is related to the whatever was west end, and 4 small charts. And legend seems to be broken here, but I probably need also to add something to legend, so it will show right things and not this Bristol, Birmingham. Okay. So, but anyway, now you can create much more powerful charts than before. And I think that can accelerate some of your sales. So I was using a lot of numbers, and some of you, I guess, confused about report viewer 2010, RDLC 2008, RDLC 2005. So that's a progression line of Microsoft reporting technologies. So at 2005, SQL Server 2005 was released, and it released a server format which is called RDL 2005. When you have a difference between RDL and RDLC is almost, it's really minimal, and essentially these two formats are the same. So with Visual Studio 2005 and 2008, you had RDLC 2005. But with a SQL Server 2008, you got RDL 2008. Now we are here with RDLC 2008 and Microsoft Visual Studio 2010. But SQL Server 2008 R2 has already released RDL 2010 specification. And that's the next bullet, the next point is where we are coming, RDLC 2010. Let's take a look what's in RDL 2010 right now. And the first question, I guess, is why should we care about that right now? The answer is following. It will be released with Visual Studio Dev 11. And release schedule for both NAV 7 and Dev 11 are not that clear. So if we release after them, we might have a chance to include this format into NAV 7, if we will have enough time. Or we will release it in the next NAV release when we will have a chance. But anyway, these features of RDL 2010 format, they are just around the corner. So, back. So first of all, the big improvement, and I know many people complained about that, but in RDL 2010, you have more explicit format of a pagination. Because currently, and even in 2008, in some elements you don't have a control of a pagination, so you don't know how page breaks will be inserted. For some elements you have, but not everywhere. Here you have more control, and there are some built-in variables which will support you in pagination control. Also, you will have a variable which will tell you which rendering format you are now using, which is important because you might want to make certain switches between if you render it, for example, for PDF or for Word. There are new UI elements which are called Spark lines and data bar, so which will help you to visualize progress over the time. You have more control over text boxes. I think it's a really cool feature when you can have a vertical text box. Indicators. Actually, you can do it today, but in order to do it today, you need to add your own bitmaps and you need to write code. Now it's kind of embedded. So you have these indicators in the default installation. What's next? Let's talk a little bit about what's next. What we are going to do with our reports. First of all, we are going to upgrade them to the Dataset Designer and to RDLC 2008. We are almost done with that for our reports. After that, we are going to remove this workaround from our reports that we will not need to do all this trick with hidden field in a body in order to bring it to the header and so on. Because it complicates report design really big time. Next thing, we are going to apply new UX guidelines, and we will talk about that in a minute. We are going to enhance report for the dataset designer. What does it mean? We actually are going to remove weird names from the dataset design. We are going to include caption where it's possible and remove a side effect of transformation, of upgrade, not of transformation, of upgrade where it's possible. And what else? And we are also going to remove unused fields, because after upgrade, we will have pretty many unused fields, and they will complicate understanding of report design. We are also going to enhance structure for performance. We have seen many escalations about performance of reports. That report which is supposed to render 1 or 2 pages actually brings megabytes of data to the client. And the reason why, because these reports are designed incorrectly. So if you use your child data item just for the calculation, it's important that you will not send this data to the client. And the way to control it is to insert current report.skip in your trigger code. I will point to the blog where one of our escalation engineers, Yasminka, actually giving more detailed explanation. And yes, we would like to add charts where it's appropriate in order to improve feel and look of our reports. And new reports should be designed from scratch using new controls. So that's what about enhancing reports for the dataset design. So we have some interesting names which are not very meaningful. We would like to get rid of them. This is a blog post about improving performance for many of existing reports. And you can also use about this report page, you know about this report page. How many people doesn't know what about this report is? Okay. Some, okay, I will show better. So if I go back to my C site and run this report, and I press Ctrl-Alt-F1, when it says that I should rerun this report, okay, that's our optimization strategy. Now I go again, and now this data zoom functionality is on. I run it again. Preview, say Ctrl-Alt-F1, and now I can see all data which are used by my report. So if, for example, I expect just a couple pages, there shouldn't be couple hundred thousands of data rows. It sounds like an inoptimal solution. Okay, let's go back. New UX report guidelines. Dynamics AX and Dynamics NAV came up together with some design guidelines which will help us to kind of have a consistent feel and look of our reports. But all of you also are welcome to follow these guidelines. They are publicly available on MSDN. So how detailed are these guidelines? So this is an example of a document report. And here, I'm not sure that everybody can see, but there are all details, how big spacing should be, what are margins, and on other screenshots you can see what is a suggested font for body text, for group header. That's another example where you have a list report with groups. It also tells how it should look. And it has all detailed information. It's not just a suggestion, so it's a specification. Or here we have like a major column header and minor column header. And also you have all information about fonts and sizes and so on. That's a link to UX guidelines. You can find it on MSDN. Okay, that was it. These are resources. We are going to have a hands-on lab on directions in US for NAV7. There are plenty of training materials for NAV 2009, and there are some good books. Now you are welcome to ask questions. So we have around 15 minutes.
I've been told that if you want to have pictures in your report, you have to do quite a workaround and put a lot of effort to it to fetch a picture from the database. Is that something that is correct? And if is that something you will improve?
So the question is about how do we handle situation when we need to load picture from the database. We know this problem, and it's one of the work items which we are going to address in this or that way. But we haven't done anything yet in NAV7 in order to address it. But that's in plans, and that's a pretty high priority item.
During the lifespan of the RTC so far, even published in the release notes, where there have been issues about known problems with reports, the Microsoft suggestion is use the classic client. Clearly, there's not going to be a classic client anymore. Are you convinced that all performance issues regarding reports in the RTC are now solved? It's great seeing the new sexy features of 2010. But in terms of raw performance, if we're outputting, for example, a 150-page stock valuation report, you know, are those performance issues solved?
So, okay, the question is, are all performance issues in RDLC report solved in order to kind of achieve a parity with what we have today in Classic? That's a really tricky question. I can say, I think so. I can say that our escalation engineers are receiving a lot of requests about performance issues on a different RDLC report. So far, they were able to address them. So far, we do not have unresolvable cases. There are a lot of improvements, like in this previous question about handling images, which we are going to make. Also, there is one possible workaround now in terms of memory. If report takes really a lot of memory, then you can always run it on server. Because with 64-bit, we have almost unlimited memory. But of course, normal reports should not take gigabytes of memory. It sounds pretty special case, I would say. And 150 pages report doesn't sound like a special case. I think we can perfectly handle it on client. So if you have some cases where you couldn't make a report perform, then you are welcome to contact us, and we will try to find it. That's for 2009. So in NAV7, we try to resolve all issues which prevents us from parity with Classic Client, and also add some new, cool, sexy features which will motivate you to move to our DLC reports, and will bring more value. Yeah. Just a small note. I was told that I should give T-shirts for some of the toughest questions. No, I don't motivate you to ask tough questions. But I think this question was really good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I bet I can beat that question.
Okay, sounds bad.
I was just thinking, the reports dataset designer looks very simple and very easy to use. What's actually happening to the processing-only property that we had on reports where we were able to put on a request form? Is this totally manual transformation, or how do we tackle
So,
that?
actually, that's a very good question, because it's an important topic, but it's a very easy question in terms of my answer. So, we will transform all processing-only reports with these upgrade reports. So, you should not be concerned about your processing-only reports. There is no problem with them. So, they are perfectly fine. They even don't have this 0.1% edge case because they don't have any layout. So 100% of processing-only reports will be moved smoothly from 2009 platform to NAV 7 platform. But thanks for the question. So, and I think this question deserves the second T-shirt. Can you? Thanks. Yeah?
This morning we heard about queries and that you can use them in reports.
Okay. So that's one of our goals, to use queries in the reports. But the scope on how we're going to use queries in the reports is not completely defined. So the keynote was an architecture talk. It's like a vision. This was a more practical, going deep into details talk. So we don't have it yet. We might have something by the end of NAV 7, but I couldn't say how much. Thanks.
You know, from 2009 on, we have this Jack Report Express being introduced into NAV as free. So we would like to know that will this Jack Report Express will be continuing in NAV 7?
Oh, that's a question to Michael, actually, not to me. So the question was, will Jet Express be continued, or you can ask, be continued for NAV 7?
So that's a really easy answer. So this is a developer conference and not a marketing conference, so I'm not able to answer that. But thanks for asking.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because there's an effort that we have to put in resources to learn Jet Report. You know, if we don't have the direction, then probably we will not invest the resources. You know, yeah.
Trans footers, trans headers. What's
Yes.
happening with them?
Somebody is laughing on the right side. You actually shouldn't, because we have a running workaround even for NAV 2009, which is solving trans header, trans footer problem, and it's published on our blog. Actually, it's not on NAV product blog, it's on NAV reporting blog. So that works. What do you mean when you up? If in terms of classic? So as I said, we haven't improved yet transformation functionality. We're still using the old one, which creates even RDLC 2005. And we do internal upgrade, and this internal upgrade is just a format upgrade from 2005 to 2008. We have a feature in our backlog about doing transformation, create layout suggestion directly to 2008. And we would like actually to make this transformation more powerful. I couldn't say how much, and I couldn't say will we be able to automatically handle trans header, trans footer cases. I am certain that we will get rid of all these hidden fields, because that's simple. But trans header, trans footer problem, I couldn't tell, but that's a very good input, so we will try to consider if we can do it. Thanks.
What about reports that use temporary tables at runtime? The data is filled and displayed at runtime.
But what's special about reports which are running temporary tables? You mean in terms of a dataset designer? But you have a definition of your temporary table. So actually, I'm not sure how do we handle this situation in 2009, if we do. But nothing has changed yet in comparison with what we have in 2009. So you have your definition, and your temporary table also has a definition. But I think today we are running out of instance tables. I'm not sure we actually, even in 2009, have a property to run out of temporary tables. But maybe I'm wrong. That's not the question I'm actually prepared to answer right now. Thanks.
There's some questions over here in the higher.
Oh, and I think this temporary table question was pretty tough for me, so I think that deserves one more T-shirt.
The query module, or the new object that you made, can we run reports from the query objects?
Okay, I'm not sure how much we can reveal about queries right now, but in theory, reports do not directly support queries today. Do not. But even if they will not support them at the end, you still have a workaround, because query has a navigate functionality, so you can execute your query and go row by row. So you can create an integer table, query variable, and use your integer table in order to run your query. That's how I see as a workaround. But we will try to make a native support for queries in the report. But it will compete with other priorities, so I couldn't actually say that, yeah, we will definitely have queries in the report. In this or that way, we will try to do something. Thanks.
Here.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Yeah, you were showing the whole caption thing with defining them per row and everything. Does that mean that basically if you want to have a multi-language type report, you're going to have to use that expression thing? I mean, I guess if you drop it, it says address.
No. Probably I wasn't that clear when I explained it. So in terms of captions, nothing really has changed. Your caption is multi-languageal. So if you have a caption which, for example, changes inside report based on the language. Imagine you are changing your current language on each record, and you want new caption to be outputted every time. In this case, you will have a caption which is per row, and we will output each individual value to the data set. So we output per row captions to the data set. We don't model them in the data set, but we output them to the data set. If you have this one which is per row false, single value, then I assume it doesn't get changed during report execution. So you have a value, you fill it once and you have it.
Well, I mean, I guess not a per row, but I mean, you drop the address, when you drop the address field, let's say, it came up with address as a heading. Are you saying that if you run that on another language without anything else, it's still going to put it in that other language?
So currently, we support only per row. Currently, we do not support any kind of parameters. So if I would change this caption really per row, if I would implement on after get record trigger, and in this trigger I would change current language to new value every time, does this example sound reasonable? Then I will have different values. But I put it in the layout to the element which can contain only one value. And that's why I had to use aggregation. I had to use this first to kind of collapse the array of the same values to one value. Because caption, header element of a table could contain only one value. If you want multiple values, then you need to put it into the table row. I mean, you have one line on top of your table, right?
There's one more question here.
Do we have more T-shirts? Yeah, so the last one. Okay, give it to the guy with caption question. Please, thanks. So we ran out of T-shirts, so no more tough questions.
Okay. Actually, I have 4 questions, but one is easy. So let's start with that one. And about the text formatting in the same text box.
Yeah.
Can it be conditioned to some parameters as we can do for other elements in the RDLC?
I think so, because you have an expression. You can actually put some expression.
Or maybe I just didn't notice it.
Yeah. There is a font tab in this dialog, and in the font tab you have many controls. You have color, you have a style, and you also have an expression. So you have some dynamicness, but I'm not certain how much dynamicness do you really have. But some elements of dynamic exists there. So because you have a expression in your font dialog.
Okay. And one question is about the classic sections property placing bottom that is not supported, let's say, in the RDLC. I mean, the footer section of the RDLC is always placed in the bottom of the page, but it sucks up some part of the page when you print the layout, and you want to print, for example, something only to the last page. Okay. You know?
Yeah, I know. Very good question. Actually, you are right. RDL, even in the latest version, doesn't support anything like place and bottom. But we are lucky in a way. We have a sister team, Dynamics AX, and they also faced the same problem, obviously. And they found workaround for some of these reports. And we're just going to use the workaround, how to deal with place and bottom. And once we will do it, I think we will document it. So you will see some blogs or how-tos on MSDN.
Okay.
But there is no direct way to support it in the format. You are right.
Okay. And the last question is about the pictures placed in the header or in the footer of the RDLC.
Mm-hmm.
Before you said about the 0.1% of the report that cannot be translated.
Mm-hmm.
This 0.1 is due to the impossibility to port the get data, set data workaround on the new RDLC.
It's not about impossibility. This workaround works. The only problem that text box in our report was hidden. In a previous version, this text box was rendered first anyway and processed first anyway. In this version, rendering engine has changed, and there are no public commitments from reporting services team about what is a rendering sequence. So they changed this rendering sequence, and they say, okay, we will render first only visible controls, and after that we will render invisible controls. So
okay,
the moment we want to render our visible controls, which expect certain data to be set, they are not set because this first control was not rendered. So how we fixed it, we just made this first control visible. And it didn't change the appearance of report because this first control actually doesn't have any value. It doesn't have any content. So it was a very, very simple fix for our side. The problem that we could not do it automatically. That's why I said that upgrade tool will transform automatically 99.9% of reports. But reports which have this edge case, and we will document this edge case, requires a developer to spend 5 minutes on it. Because that was literally the time our developers spent on these reports. And okay, you will also need 5 minutes to run it and see that it works.
We have one more question.
There is also a question here on the first row, so I can see the hand for a long time.
Okay, please do.
One of the more complex things with the reporting is that we have one single huge data set. I remember reading something about multiple data sets in the new reporting in NAV 7. So is that coming or no? Because well, it creates redundant values in your data set, and it's also harder to work with because you have to resort, reshuffle, and redo all the things on one single data set.
I can see this question. So we still have one data set, as you can see. And that has advantages and disadvantages. If you have two data sets, you couldn't combine data from two data sets in one table. So you generally have to choose what do you want to do, grouping or several data sets. What is a bigger problem? Because when you do grouping, you generally come to the situation of several data sets. More than that, you couldn't combine several data sets in one data region. So elements like you have a complex grouping, like one row, details, another row, details again. With several data sets, that will not work. But that's also an option which we are considering. Maybe not for the local reports, but for some other future enhancements about providing multiple data sets or maybe multiple queries to the report design. Thanks. What?
Could you still take a few questions? We're running slightly out of time, but a few minutes is still possible.
Okay.
Is that okay for you?
Yeah, that's
There were
fine.
some questions over there, if I'm not mistaken.
Are there any plans to make the report viewer a page part, or have you improved the chart part?
Okay, that's a good question. I can say, attend Christian Abel's presentation tomorrow, and he will talk about improving chart parts. So we are not going to make a report viewer as a page part, because reports might have a certain latency. So that's not a goal right now. And we believe that on pages, charts should be able to solve all possible scenarios, charts and list places.
Thank you. I have perhaps a small question. Right now, if you print an order or an invoice, you have to take into account you're printing multiple documents, and the page number doesn't reset every new number, so you have to use a workaround. Is there something, is it some improved in a way?
So if you, just to repeat your question, when you are printing several invoices, you have several invoices generally in the same report, or you are printing several reports?
You are doing one printing run?
One report object.
Yes.
Okay. So there are no improvements of that in RDLC 2008, but there is a huge improvement in this area in RDL 2010. So once we will be on RDLC 2010, this problem will be really easily solved. So you can restart your page numbers, you can have your page names named, and you can generally program against your pages.
So I have two ideas for maybe improvements for all of us.
Welcome.
The first is include captions should be set to yes. Or we should have a possibility in the setup to choose if it's set to yes or to no.
Mm-hmm.
So not everybody must click in every field to say yes, 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 yes. You get a wrong problem on your hand or in your mouse. Second improvement, as you saw, if you re-import the design from Visual Studio to Navision, it could be compiled automatically, because it will be always compiled. So it can be one step automatically and not reload, compile.
Okay. Thanks for your suggestions. About the first item on include captions, we have a feedback of this type. First of all, we have an item in the backlog about promoting include caption to the main designer. So at least you will not need to go to the properties. But that's a very good point. We will consider what is the majority of situations. If in majority of situations, in most of situations, we need to have include captions, then we will probably switch them on by default, and you will be able to switch them off. But we definitely are going to promote include caption to the main designer, so no properties. And the second about compiling by default, I'm not sure. It sounds like a dangerous idea. I can see there is a certain pain about doing recompilation all the time. But on the other side, you are not sure that your report will compile. And if it will stop you from working, then yeah. But thanks anyway, so I can see there is a pain. When you are doing such demos yourself, you can feel the pain. And as I said, what I was doing most of the time is compile, run, compile, run. So thanks, very good input.